I want to do a video about changing the front discs on the 955s and probably all of the Sprints, I don't know. This is a 955 injection. It's a T registered 99 model with about 70,000 miles on the clock. So the problem I had, I'll go through the sequence, is these discs have not only gone too thin and ridged, but they've actually warped over. So if you look at that, it's not even central. It's like the rims have shrunk and flipped in, and you can actually hear that snap. Can you see that? So that's really bad. I didn't want those. So I've got a really nice pair. I got these off eBay and they looked cheap, but I saw from the photographs the actual rim was great. So I've de-rusted these, painted them, and before I started I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to get in trouble with the disc bolts. These are the disc bolts and they go into the hub, and they were rusted, so I was worried they were going to shear off, but fortunately the previous guy put them in at the correct torque and they didn't have a problem. But last week I got my 6mm Allen key in. Has to be a really good one, not rounded, and I made sure all of them could be loosened. I did them up with the torque wrench to the correct torque that the book says, and that's fine. So I knew that I could do this. Now the trick is to get the weight off the front, put it on the side stand, sorry, the center stand, and luckily I've got some heavy weights here, batteries, starter motors, etc. You can put these on the rack securely, or I've got a top box, and that means that I can take the front wheel out without the bike falling forwards. So the next thing to do is to take out the calipers, and there's a little trick here, because normally the rims are a bit thick. So what you want to do is loosen up the pads, and I found if you get some pump pliers, what you can do, I'll show you from the back here. You don't need to take this bolt out. Just get your pliers and squeeze gently. You don't want to bend it. See the pad, push it closer to the casting, away from the center, both sides, and just beware that that will fill up your reservoir. So if it starts leaking out of here, get ready to wipe off the surplus. In fact, these are not fully back yet, but do that both sides, and then you will find after you've taken out the caliper bolts that they slip out. Now the tool you're going to need for the originals is this Torx bit, and this size is 55. Can't quite see that. I think it's a 55. Now I had a problem before because I actually ripped the thread out of this bottom one, and what I've done is a helicoil repair, but because it's a metric fine pitch, I went up to an M10 standard pitch. So one of my bolts is not the original fine, it's now standard metric. So watch out, because this was caused by over tightening the bolt, and it strips the aluminium. It's a steel bolt that rusts and it goes into the aluminium. Very easy to damage the threads, so don't overdo it, and make sure when you put them in all the threads are clean, and you use a bit of Loctite thread locker, non-setting, so that they won't rattle out if they did get loose. That's all in the official manual that you want to get or look up, which gives you the torques for this model. Okay, so I've taken out all my bolts. I decided to completely de-rust them on the wire wheel and give them a top coat of paint, because they were rusting. They're obviously not stainless steel, or if they are, they're not very good rust resistance. I've already refurbished the discs I got, so they're like, I wouldn't say like new, but they're as good as I can get them, and it won't go rusty quick. Those are stainless, so they pop out, and you can see the thickness on there is great. There's no distortion, no buckle popping, and they're ready to go on. So I took the opportunity, because the wheel was disgusting, to wipe off all of the dirt and dust with some petrol rags, and then I use some carb cleaner with rags just to get the flaky paint off, and I've basically sprayed it with chrome effect, which will not last, but it just gives an extra protection to the aluminium. So where there were scratches and blisters before, it's all covered now by an airtight covering of new paint. I'd paid particular attention not to paint this area because you want the disc sitting flat, don't you? So that's all ready. So the next stage is just going to be reverse of procedure. I ought to tell you about the front axle. So in order to take the wheel out, first stage is to squeeze the pads so that they are away from the discs, as I just showed you with the pump pliers. Second stage, remove the caliper bolts. You have to do this or you won't get the wheel out. Don't think you can wiggle the wheel out, it won't work. Even with the discs loose, the pads are closer together than the width of the rim. So all you're going to do is scratch the paint on the wheel. Get the pads out, obviously suspend them out of the way. I'm using some bungee cords so that they don't drop into the wheel repeatedly and scratch and dirty things. Makes life easier. Next stage, you need to loosen these two 6mm Allen bolts, which are pinch together on the end of the axle here. This is the axle removed. Okay, and they just pinch that, stop it turning. And then you need a 24mm spanner. It shouldn't be stiff. Probably you only need a standard wrench, and undo this with your 24mm, which is there, and that will come anti-clockwise, and it will unscrew from this side because this side is actually threaded. Okay, that's how it works. So you've then, having withdrawn the whole shaft, you'll find on the right hand side you've got this aluminium bush which fits inside the oil seal. So that's on my right, and then on my left you've got the speedo drive, which is a dog fit. You need to get that right when it goes back in, and that will sit so that the notch matches in there. Okay, that's important when it goes back together. So the piece slides out, you drop the wheel down, you disconnect the speedo drive, you take the bush out, and you've got the wheel loose, and then you will take the disc off. Now what I did, I realised it could be quite stiff undoing these and difficult, so I undid all of those bolts before I took the wheel out. So I had the weight on the wheel, I got all of the bolts loose, and I just had the discs basically hanging on by one bolt, and then I took the wheel out, and I'm going to do the reverse. So when I put these new bolts, sorry, refurbished bolts back in, I'm going to put them in so they're not torqued up. I'm going to do the final torque when the bike is all set up. I'm going to spin round, make sure that there's no wobble. Personally, I'm going to use a dial gauge, but you can use your eye. You mustn't have is wavy discs, or run out as they call it. So as the wheel revolves, the disc needs to be exactly the same distance to the pads constantly. Otherwise, when you brake, you'll get juddering. Okay, so if that's the problem, look for corrosion on the back of the discs. And what you'll see here is I've already slid these around on the hub. Make sure they're absolutely flat. There's no high points here where I put a bit of paint. If there is, sand it down and just put grease there. Alright, or you can put some sealant if you like, but you mustn't have high paint on the side which is going onto the wheel, otherwise that could cause it to be slightly out. So after I've got this back in the bike, I've made sure it's true. I tighten up, obviously in a sensible sequence, opposite sides in a sort of star pattern, crisscrossing. Get the torques done with the weight on the wheel gradually, and then that's it. You've put the already put the brakes in so that you could test the run out, and then just pump the brakes before you move off. Make sure that you've got the fluid down. If you've dribbled any fluid in the process, you need to bleed the brakes. and that's it. Incidentally, while it was out, I decided to clean off all the dirt on the forks, and I did that with a dirty old rag, and I had some petrol here, and it gets off really good. And the paint I'm using, I got on the internet, it's just a chrome effect paint. It's like aluminium and zinc in there. I found it pretty good for corrosion, and so I didn't overspray everything. I just used the lid of the pot. Good trick this. And you spray the paint in like this, and you build up liquid paint in the bottom. You then use your paintbrush just to go over and dab around until you're happy, up and down. Remember to get under the bike and look for dirt as well, because that's where the corrosion is going to be causing problem. And I say, it's not just cosmetic. A fresh coat of paint is going to fill in any cracks and grazes and just protect it from corrosion damage, because after all, this is aluminium. It's close to a road. This bike goes on the road in the winters with salt, so it's just all going to be nicely done. So there you are, that's the sequence, and hope it helps you a lot of time, because I was worried that I'd have to have a professional do this, maybe charge £100, but as it is, I've done it myself, and without the cleaning and painting work, probably you could do this in half an hour, but as usual, I'm being meticulous about it, and it's taken me a few hours and a cup of tea. Okay. Little update here. So I noticed that there's some markings on here for left and right, probably. Shouldn't really matter, but this is stamped here TER, and the other one is marked NWL. So I'm thinking maybe that's left and right. So that's respect to the rider's position. So this is the speedo drive is on the right hand side of my bike. So I've got the disc marked R on there. As I say, what I'm going to do is I've just got some liquid paint here. I just put a thin layer around because I don't want it corroding under these, and I don't want the rain getting in and corroding the bolts. So then I'm putting the disc on, rotating it around to make sure there's no high points, and then each bolt will get the first 3 or 4 threads with some nylock, and put into a initial torque just to make sure. There we go, that's too much. This is just to stop them shaking loose, nothing more, and they will go down. No grease. The thread lock will actually act as a lube in a way. I've cleaned the threads off. There we go. One more. There you go. Stuff I use is Loctite 243, but any thread locker should be fine. And then when I tighten these, I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, like a star pattern. That way, you're clamping it down gradually. It should sit down evenly.